Just noticed that I forgot to bring pens and pencils. Who knows where those are in our office? I don't know. No. Yeah, Janice, go in the first door of the office and go to the left, and then those counters that are underneath the shelves, cabinets underneath the counter. If you could get some pens and pencils, that'd be great. Thanks. Good to see everybody. Welcome. This is the beginning of a Lenten series called Growing a Rule of Life. And some of you may have one of these little brochures that we've been handing out. We didn't have a whole lot of them, but had a good number. So to open, if you would join with me in an opening prayer. Well, is that going to work? The magic of technology. I think my computer is frozen. It is. So I think I'll talk for a little bit, and then we will reboot and let the and do the opening prayer a little bit later. Oh, maybe we can do it right now. Let's see. Here we go. Our opening prayer. If you will do the part in bold. Let the earth glorify the Lord. Glorify the Lord, O mountains and hills, and all that grows upon the earth. Glorify the Lord, O springs of water, seas and streams. All birds of the air glorify the Lord. Glorify the Lord, O beasts of the wild. O men and women everywhere, glorify the Lord. That is adapted from the Book of Common Prayer, from a song of creation, which is one of the canticles in morning prayer. And morning prayer is one of those things that you might consider as a Lenten discipline. I think my Lenten discipline will be to enjoy nearly everything going wrong for 40 days and see how I handle it. The image we're going to be working with is the image of growing a garden. And I want to tell you a story about that in my life. Not too long after I was ordained, about 2 years or so afterwards, I was called to be the rector of St. Columb's Church in Jackson, Mississippi. It was my first chance to be a rector. And, oh, man, it was fun. It was like Brer Rabbit being thrown in the briar patch. I was just having a great time until I wasn't. And I was just working so hard. And then at some point, I remember I was in the shower and the phone rang. And in my mind told me, that's a phone call telling you that your mother has just died. But I'm in the shower and I'll never get to the phone before it stops ringing. And then another part of me said, no, that's not quite right, Lowell. Something's wrong in your mind. So I went to visit with a friend of mine who's a clinical psychologist. We talked a while and he said, well, yeah, you're a little bit depressed, I'd say. so we talked about that a bit, and he said, you're burned out. It's overwork. You've been going too hard. And then he wasn't much help after he diagnosing me. But I found he's a great guy. I would refer you to him any day. I found a book, though, by John Sanford. It was called Ministry Burnout. John Sanford, a Jungian analyst and Episcopal priest, and using the Myers-Briggs personality thing. I don't know if you've ever done Myers-Briggs. He talked about most of us work out of our dominant energy, our dominant strength. Well, mine was intuition, in the second part of the Myers-Briggs. And my intuition was the energy that I worked out of, adapted to, and basically I was just worn out. And what John Sanford said is, we typically get our energy from the unused or disowned part of our personality. And so the opposite of the I is the S, which is sensate, things that you can touch and taste and feel. And so do something sensate and you will get energy back. And the other part he said was, in ministry, Lent comes around every year for 30 days. And it comes out around every year. Now it's for 35 years as I've been ordained. And you can do the same thing, like the same sermon, year after year after year. And in some way, you don't ever see any changes, any progress, or any completion. So do something, said John Sanford's book, that is sensate, if you're burned out from your intuition, and where you can see some results. So I happened across a Southern Living magazine, a little bitty article this big in the bottom of one of the pages, and it talked about how to make a fish pond using a plastic liner. And that's before those things were as common as they are now. So out our back door, you walk out the back door, there was this little pad. We called it a patio. It was about that big. And so Lowell, fairly depressed, went to the end of the pad, started digging a hole. Well, I had this dirt. What'd I do with that? Well, I just walked up to the middle of the yard and started dumping. And I went back, and as I started digging that hole, I began to feel better. And after a while, I had finished building this little fish pond and had fish in it, and I was feeling much better. And then Kathy pointed out that I'd left a big pile of dirt right in the middle of the yard. So I got some of those great big 6x6 things to put around it and created my first flower garden and began to plant perennials and began to feel just good. So that began to be my therapy, my balance. I would burn my eye out every week, and I'd go home and dig a hole. And before long, we had beds all around. And my best one was I started reading books, and studying about flowers. And so I got this English book teaching about double digging. So I dug a bed that was about 30 feet long, about 5-6 feet wide, maybe 7 or 8 in the widest, and sort of a kidney shape, 24 inches deep. And then I called our local extension guy, Felder Rushing. You may have seen him on TV. Felder's a character. He's got a show on PBS a lot. Felder came. He looked at I wanted some advice. He looked at my hole, and he fell over laughing. He said, "You've been reading those English books, haven't you? Those English gardening books." He said, "That won't do you a bit of good. That's really good for a swimming pool. But did you notice how hard it was to dig that?" "Yeah," I said, "that was like concrete." "It's clay," he said. "We got nothing but clay here in Jackson. You can't dig down. It just creates a pool, and you'll drown everything you planted. And that's why we build up. So fill the hole back in and dig up," he said. So I did. And gardening, I found, was healing to my soul. It gave me a way to be in touch with creation, to be more in tune with the weather and the seasons. And we get so protected when we spend our time indoors and in air-conditioned and heated cars and such. It was tactile. It was physical, and it fed the spirit. Maybe you've noticed the Scripture, the Bible itself, opens in a garden and closes in a garden. Gardening is a deep and wonderful tradition, and gardening, we want to talk about during Lent, gardening for the soul. So this is phase one, this first class, exploring rule of life and rhythm of nature, understanding what a rule of life is, and using garden as a metaphor for a rule of life and why that's important. Now, this class is coming out of the practices and teachings of the brothers of the Society of St. John the Evangelist. They are in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and West Newbury, Massachusetts. Suzanne was just in West Newbury for her retreat last month. It is a wonderful community of Episcopalian monks practicing ancient monastic traditions of prayer, worship, study, and service. They live under a common rule of life, and they bring elements of that rule into everyday lives in the invitation to make a rule of life for ourselves. This curriculum was also produced with the help from the Center for Ministry and Teaching at Virginia Theological Seminary. So I hope that you've gone to the website and subscribed to their daily email at www.ssje.org/growrule. Just give them your email and they'll send their email address, and they'll send you a daily email with a video and a question about this whole theme of developing a rule of life. You can also share your thoughts through social media about this series as it comes into your inbox, as you watch or read the message, and then as you think about it. So here's what I want you to do. Think about a special place or moment in time when you experienced God's presence in the natural world, or when you came to a deeper understanding of God through some encounter out in creation. Think of a special place or a special moment when you've experienced God in nature, in creation, or you've encountered God in some way. I want to give you a few seconds to think about that, and then invite you to share that. So think about times and places where creation has touched you with the sense of the divine presence. Okay, now go around the circle at your tables and introduce yourselves. And I want to invite you to share what maybe that moment was that came to you, that place or experience in creation that was particularly meaningful to you. And it's okay to pass, but do let folks know who you are. So talk for a bit and share your experience of God in creation. Oh, I hope that was fun. Anybody got a good one from your table that would be fun to share? I see some negotiating going on. So, Carolyn? Yeah, Carolyn. Yes. Yes.
I was telling them when I was leaving from Houston, I had a lot of anxiety about where am I going, what am I going to be doing, where am I going to stay. And it was this bird house, this two-tier bird houses. And so it's like God told me, if I take care of the birds and the bees, what more would I do for you? So I took a picture of the birdhouse. And so here in Fayetteville, in our yard, there's a tall thing with the birdhouse on it. And I was telling somebody the story, and I went to show them a picture of the birdhouse, and it's identical to the birdhouse that I took in Houston. Only thing is it's 3-tier, and the one here is 2-tier. So that was my aha moment, that God is right there and right in everything I go in, and I don't have to worry.
Yeah, be not anxious. The birds of the air, God feeds them and even sees the fall of the sparrow. How much more shall He take care of you? So many of the stories in Scripture from Jesus have things of nature in them. So many of the parables are nature-oriented. Jesus was obviously someone at home in His physical world. And what the designers of this curriculum want us to do now is to imagine creating a garden fence in order to create a safe, protected, and fertile place for group work and for your individual work. Any of you who live out where the deer are, you know you better put a good fence around, or lots of other critters, to if you're going to plant a garden. And so we've got this illustration of a garden fence that's protecting the place where you're going to go inside of yourself to make it fertile, to make it creative, to make it protected. And so here are some suggestions. First, be open. Open yourself to this process. Invite God fully into each idea, into each question you may have as you develop a rule of life. And be creative. Think outside the box. There may be a unique image of what you want your garden to include. Another rail or post in the fence is be gentle. Be gentle with yourself. There aren't any right or wrong answers, and making up a rule of life is not a competition. Best rule wins. Be realistic. Simple and honest answers are far more useful than sweeping idealistic ones when we're creating a rule of life. Be patient. This is often a lifelong process. Give yourself time to develop your ideas along the way. Another good idea is to be flexible, willing to change and modify your ideas as your life moves through different seasons. So, as you begin to think about creating a rule of life, are there any other posts that you might add to your fence, or the way that you might like to do this work, this inner work and the shared work of creating a rule of life? Any other qualities, attitudes? Yeah, Francis?
I think be open to surprises.
Yeah. Be open to surprise. Yeah, be able to be surprised. Yeah. Diane?
I think we need to be brave.
Yeah.
Because just opening up and looking within yourself does take courage.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Be brave. What else?
I think you need to be forgiving
Yeah.
and be open to inspiration.
Be forgiving. Be open to inspiration. Are there qualities you want to set up around this area in the center of your being to do some good gardening work? Yeah, Kristen?
Be kind of the opposite, but I was thinking be disciplined to make sure that I do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, be disciplined. Yeah, Kelsey?
I would say be non-judgmental of both yourself and others.
Yeah.
Be kind.
Be kind. Be kind. Yeah, you can add some of these into these rails as if they hit your spot. Trent?
I was just going to add to have a companion or community in it. It kind of goes along with discipline and not overly harsh, but just someone else you're sort of accountable to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having a spiritual director can be really, really helpful. Somebody who knows your pathologies and keeps you true. Yeah, Jim?
Be persistent.
Yeah. Be persistent.
Be sincere, be honest.
Yeah. So any of those that hit your spot, do add them to your list of some of the context in which you want to work and the images, posts that are good protection posts around your garden. Now I want you to listen for a moment as I read a reading that I hope helps set a context for growing your spiritual life through the help of a rule of life. This comes from a wonderful book, Soul Feast, by Marjorie Thompson. She's awfully good. So if you would, listen as I read. Certain kinds of plants need support in order to grow properly. Tomatoes need stakes, and beans must attach themselves to suspended strings. Without support, these plants would collapse into a heap on the ground. Their blossoms would not have the space and the sun they need to flourish, and their fruits would rot in contact with the soil. We would be unable to enjoy their beauty and sustenance. When it comes to spiritual growth, human beings are much like these plants. We need structure and support. Otherwise, the fruit of the Spirit in us gets tangled and is susceptible to corruption. We need structure in order to have enough space, air, and light to flourish. Structure gives us the freedom to grow as we are meant to. There is a name in Christian tradition for the kind of structure that supports our spiritual growth. It is called a rule of life. A rule of life is a pattern of spiritual disciplines that provide structure and direction for growth in holiness. It is meant to help us establish a rhythm of daily living, a basic order within which new freedoms can grow. And if you like that quote, you can download the participants' workbook on the website that I was showing earlier. So I want to define a rule of life. The idea comes from the Latin word regula, R-E-G-U-L-A, and suggests a way to regulate or to regularize our lives, to stay on an intentional path. A rule of life is not just a set of rules to live by. It's rather a gentle framework to guide and to support us along our way. The first rules of life come out of the monastic communities in the desert in the 4th and 5th centuries. And communities and individuals can really benefit from these ancient practices. Carolyn, you're part of a community now that has a rule of life based on the Benedictine rule of life. And reflecting on that daily is a part of your daily rule. And any of you who would like to be part of that, we have our Magdalene Circle at 9 at Magdalene House each morning based on the Benedictine rule of life, a way of coming back to those guideposts. It's wonderful stuff. A rule of life allows us to live with intention and purpose in the present moment. It's also good to clarify what's important. What are my most important values? It's important to clarify our relationships and keep our relationships in the places where we want them in order of priority. It's a way of fertilizing our dreams, and it's a way of doing our work in a healthy way. A rule of life is meant to be simple, realistic, flexible, and achievable. Let me say those four again. Simple, realistic, somebody said that earlier when you're thinking, flexible, and achievable. It is a purposeful tool to help us grow into a more meaningful life with God. So if I could borrow that same handout table, if y'all could give these out to everybody. I've got some sample rules of life. Yes.
And I'm sure it'll become more clear once I see some examples. Is I keep thinking, okay, theoretically in this scenario, we're supposed to be like plants, right?
Yeah.
I think you have to figure out what kind of plant you are first.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
So if you think of yourself as the garden and the gardener maybe, and the plants are the different things that you want to grow in your garden.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a little more like you. You are the garden and the gardener, and the plants are the habits that you want to grow in your garden. So each of these sample rules has its own focus, its own specific, unique practices. Some are more reasonable than others. Some are unconventional. Others are traditional. And so what I want to invite you to do is to have some fun with these practices. You've got, starting on this side, the daily practices of Pope Francis, and then several others, and then on the back side a couple more. So what I want you to do is just have some fun. Spend a few minutes reading these and maybe writing on it, taking notes, and what stands out, what's attractive, what's not so much. And then we'll talk together. If you find something that catches your attention as we read and as we talk together, on the back side of your garden fence, you've got a little paper that says seeds. So if you see something that might be a seed that you want to plant in your garden, jot something down on the back side of the garden fence on the side that says seeds. So spend a couple of minutes reading these different practices, these different rules of life, and then we'll come together with a bit of conversation. You can circle things, jot notes on that. You can spend a few minutes in conversation about what was funny or what catches your attention, what might be a seed that you might want to plant in your garden. Share a little bit about what this tells you. And feel free to write things down that you may want to keep. So, if you haven't already, you might start jotting some things down that are beginning to be some of the seeds that you may want to begin to create your rule of life. Maybe some of the things on here. Here are some seeds from some participants that come out of their workbook. Set aside some time each day for silence. That little there. Here. Review. What is that? Review something I've performed and think about what has nurtured my soul. I could read this better on my computer at home than I can at this. Let's see. Strengthen my relations with children and spouse. Do more hobbies. A couple of folks like the one about from Pope Francis, take a nap each day. One of a priest that was really important to me in my early life always took a nap each afternoon. He said it was the one time when he knew he was doing God's will that day. And I remember when I was trying to get it nailed into my day to take some time with Scripture, to pray each day, and it's just getting crowded out because I was so important and so busy. It was during Jimmy Carter's presidency, and the President of the United States every day read Scripture and prayed. And if he's got time for that, you know, I think Lowell can do that. Let's see if these show up. Oh, that's even worse. Here, now this is kind of interesting. Measurable, let's see if I've got that little. Measurable, achievable, what is that word? Okay. So think about some of the qualities that you want in your own rule of life. To live more simply, this one says, intentionally. To clear away things. That pruning and weeding business. So begin to collect some seeds that may, every person's different. There are lots of paths to the fullness of Christ's love. So not one size fits all. So as you go through these next few weeks creating a rule of life, be realistic be realistic. I remember when I was learning to brush my teeth. That's the hardest thing I ever did. I didn't think I was ever going to get those little stars on the refrigerator. There was always something more interesting to do than brushing my teeth. And then I would think of it, but if I didn't do it right then, I would forget. It took me 2 years to get where I would brush my teeth regularly. But now I just love to brush my teeth. It's not a fight anymore. It's the most natural thing in the world. So many good habits are like that. So think in the long term. I'm going to close with a poem, and then it's a little past. I tell you what, I'm going to skip the poem. Y'all come tonight, and we're going to pick up with some of this tonight if you can. We'll pick up a little bit. We'll go back to some of these practices and developing and work a little further tonight if you can come. So thank you so much. If you haven't signed up online, make sure you do at the SSJE site. See you tonight, or if not, next week.